Welcome to the Veterinary Financial Podcast, where we discuss financial freedom and professional success. I'm Meredith Jones, a veterinarian and financial planner for vets. Today, I wanted to talk about 3 financial patterns I see over and over again talking with veterinarians. These are patterns that often feel reasonable in the moment, but over time, they can quietly create stress and burnout and financial stagnation. A lot of the ideas for today's episode came from conversations I've had with veterinarians over the years, whether it was in the Debt-Free Vets Facebook group or through working with financial planning clients over the years or on student loan consults. When you talk to enough vets about money, careers, burnout, and financial stress, certain themes start showing up repeatedly. Sometimes the 3 patterns that I'm going to talk about, sometimes they reinforce each other too. So if you think about it, a lot of vets feel pressure from their student loans. A lot of vets, even if they don't have student loans, they may delay financial decisions because they're waiting until they get the time or the bandwidth to make the perfect choice. And I see some vets, and I've been there myself, stay in a job that's not sustainable for them. For example, I've seen some vets who maybe accept a job that is based mostly on salary because it feels like it's financially safest versus taking a look at the whole picture when it comes to comparing one job offer versus another. So the 3 patterns I wanted to talk about today are perfectionism around money, letting student loans drive career decisions, and looking at compensation too narrowly. So let's start with the first one, which is perfectionism. Of course, as veterinarians, we're trained to get things right, and that mindset serves us really well clinically because, of course, attention to detail matters a lot in veterinary medicine. If you think about it, though, financially, that same mindset can sometimes work against us. I see some veterinarians delay getting started with their financial to-dos because they feel like they need to fully understand everything first. They want to research every investment option before contributing anything to retirement. I've seen that before. Find the perfect high-yield savings account for them before opening an account. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's a savings account. And there's not really actually a lot of difference between them. Creating the perfect budget before they move forward with their finances. Waiting until they can invest a meaningful amount before starting to invest. So that's another thing that I see where it's like, okay, you can start small and build from there. Those are some examples of you're waiting for the perfect moment, nothing happens. Sometimes this can also show up as an all or nothing mindset. Like, okay, if I can't invest a large amount, then why bother? If I can't completely fix my debt situation quickly, then what's the point? If I can't track every category perfectly, I'm not even going to budget. I'm not even going to do a cash flow plan. But financial progress, it's actually usually built through small, consistent action, not perfect decisions. Someone investing $100 a month consistently, they are often going to end up in a much better position than someone who spends years trying to optimize every detail before investing their first dollar. This shows up outside of personal finance too. I've seen associates struggle to delegate because they want everything done perfectly, which often ends up limiting their own production. Practice owners sometimes spend huge amounts of time trying to do every task themselves instead of focusing on the higher value decisions that only they can make. So you've heard about people spending time on $10 an hour tasks versus saving that practice owner's limited admin time that they might have for the $1,000 an hour tasks. And I think veterinarians often overestimate the cost of making an imperfect financial decision and underestimate the cost of waiting. Most financial decisions are adjustable, so you can start now and increase your retirement contributions later. Of course, don't forget to do that. Don't forget to increase them later. You can rebalance your investments later. You can refine your budget later, but go ahead and get started. Momentum matters more than precision. This is where the patterns often start feeding into each other, because when you already feel anxious about your money or about your student loans, perfectionism tends to get even stronger. You can start feeling like every financial decision has enormous consequences. So instead of taking action, sometimes we tend to freeze. Number 2 is letting student loans drive career decisions. So that's the second pattern that I often will see. And we actually talked about this more deeply in the last episode, episode 88. Don't let student loans dictate your career decisions. So if this topic especially resonates with you, I definitely go back and listen to that episode too. Of course, student debt is a real issue among veterinarians. The loans are not small. They definitely deserve attention and planning and strategy, but sometimes the debt becomes emotionally so large that it starts driving every major decision in some people's lives. So I hear things like, oh, well, I can't afford to cut back on my hours. I can't afford to switch jobs. Some people will say, I actually probably should take the higher paying job, even though I know I'll hate it. I've seen that on the Debt Free Vets Facebook group. Some people will say, I'll make changes once my loans are gone, and continue to perhaps work in a job or a career sector that isn't working for them anymore. And sometimes people just end up building their entire life around trying to out-earn the student loan debt. The problem with that is that burnout has a financial cost too. Staying in an unsustainable role for years because it pays slightly more can eventually impact your health, your relationships, your longevity in the profession, and even your long-term earning potential. I think sometimes vets start making career decisions primarily out of fear of losing income, fear of, okay, how is this going to affect my student loan debt, fear of making the wrong move. And then over time, that can quietly push people into schedules, work environments, career paths that are not actually sustainable for them long term. One thing I remind people of often is that multiple career paths can work financially. There isn't usually just one correct answer. So you can try something for a few years and see how you like it. The veterinary profession is wide open. There are so many different roles that are available to us that didn't even exist many years ago. So that's something else to keep in mind. So it's not always one correct answer. A lower stressed role may still work for you financially. A residency may still work for you financially. Working fewer shifts, that may still work for you financially. But when you don't have clarity around your student loan strategy or what your financial goals are, that's when it becomes really overwhelming, right? And certainly with student loan debt, the debt can start feeling very overwhelming emotionally, and that pressure tends to narrow decision making. I think it's more helpful to think of student loans as a constraint rather than the driver of all of those decisions, right? So they're important, absolutely, but not necessarily the thing that should determine all of your career decisions that you make for the next 20, 30 years, right? This ties directly into the third pattern. Once people feel financially pressured, they often start evaluating opportunities almost entirely based on compensation, which I don't think is a good thing. So that's number 3, looking at compensation too narrowly. So I often will see folks, especially on the Facebook group, evaluating jobs too narrowly through the lens of salary or sign-on bonus. And this is incredibly common, especially for vets who are switching jobs or moving or new grads. So if a hospital offers a higher base salary or a large sign-on bonus, sometimes it can immediately feel like it's a better financial decision, but compensation is so much broader than just the base pay. or a sign-on bonus. So things that often get overlooked and things that people often forget to ask in interviews. People forget to ask about the schedule and the workload, and is there mentorship available? What does the technician support look like? And sometimes when you're interviewing places, thinking about how that production works, asking about, okay, the other associates there, can you give me, whether it's at that hospital or in that region, especially if it's corporate, they can often give you some sort of data around, okay, this is how much production people generally have made in this position or make in this position currently. Negative accrual is something that comes up often as something that can get overlooked. A little bit more light on that than there used to be. Retirement benefits, a lot of times people forget to ask about those, and it's like, yeah, that's not going to be negotiable, but when you're comparing one job to another, certainly something to account for, whether there's a match, etc. The health insurance benefits and whether health insurance is covered, how much does it cost, because that can vary widely from one practice to another. Team dynamics, how well does the team work together? Has there been a lot of turnover? That associate that you're replacing, why are you replacing them? Why did they leave? The efficiency of the practice, what's something that practice has introduced in the last few years that has been really helpful, or something that they're really excited about that's been introduced in the past year. Those are all things to keep in mind when you're evaluating a position. And the other thing that I see too, because, okay, you've got your base salary, but if you are having to play tech as a veterinarian, instead of being able to just be a doctor, well, maybe at that practice you wouldn't produce as much as you would at a practice where there might be a little bit lower base salary, but they've got the technicians in there working at the top of their license, and therefore you are able to see more cases, help more pets, and you're a higher producer. And even two jobs with very similar salaries can create completely different lifestyles for yourself. If you think about, okay, do they get out on time every day? Do they frequently stay after hours doing paperwork? The hours piece matters a lot more than people realize. I've seen positions advertised as 4 days a week where the workload is completely unsustainable. The shifts run long, people are missing lunch. They're staying late constantly doing records, charting after hours. Maybe the practice isn't open to having an AI scribe tool, etc. So all of that adds up. 5 extra hours a week might not sound dramatic initially, but over the course of a year, that can become substantial. That can become additional weeks worth of time that you have worked over the course of a year. If it's something like 5-10 hours extra a week. That's real time, real energy, real burnout. And sometimes the highest paying offer is not actually the strongest long-term financial opportunity. Mentorship and training matter. Support from your team matters. A position with strong mentorship early in your career can improve your skills and your confidence, your efficiency, and your earning potential for years after that. The same thing applies to production pay. A higher production percentage doesn't automatically mean higher income if the support staff is weak, like I said, if the schedule is inefficient, the way it's set up, if the workflow is really chaotic, or large portions of services are excluded from your production, or depending on how they've got the rest of it structured with medications, for example. And that's why due diligence when you are looking at job opportunities matters so much. I always encourage people to spend as much time in the practice as you can beyond just the primary interview. Shadow a busy shift. Talk to associates who have worked there. Talk to relief vets who have worked there if you can. Ask really detailed questions about the support and the workflow. The same hospital can feel very different depending on what day-to-day life actually looks like I see that with corporate offers, for example, where it's just like, oh, I'm comparing, this big name corporate hospital to this other big name corporate hospital. And it's like, those could actually be completely, it's like the same name, but completely different hospitals, completely different work environments. The goal is not simply to choose and find the highest paying offer. The goal is to find a role that works for you, that is sustainable for you. And certainly you want to make sure you're making enough money to pay your bills. But if it's sustainable, that's going to make it a lot more doable. So bringing all of that together, these three patterns, perfectionism, student loans driving decision-making, and narrow thinking about compensation, they often show up together. So you delay getting started financially because you want to make the perfect decision. Your student loans create pressure and sometimes fear around career choices. And then you evaluate opportunities based mostly on compensation because it feels safer financially. But there's another approach. You can take small, consistent actions with your finances. You can create a clear plan for your student loans so that they stop dominating your decisions once you've got a clear strategy, and that's something that we can help with. And evaluate opportunities from a broader perspective, not just the salary. Financial success looks different for everyone, just like veterinary careers can look different for everyone. Some vets will prioritize flexibility over everything else. Some prioritize income. Some prioritize time with family. Some people want to make sure that they've got ownership, whether that's being a practice owner or running their own hospital as a medical director. Some want just more stability in their job and in their life. Some people want adventure. We hear about vets who just want to set themselves up so that they can travel as much as possible. There isn't one correct path. You don't need to have everything figured out immediately. You just need to keep moving in the right direction. And this is a lot of what we help our financial planning clients with, helping them figure out what is my next best step financially. What are my next financial to-dos that I need to take care of in order to move things forward? We help with student loan strategy. We help folks who are considering a career pivot. That's a common goal that comes up. And so that's something that we help with as well. So if you're looking for veterinarian-specific financial planning, you can learn more at allvetfinancial.com and click the Book Now button to schedule a free intro call. And until next time, take care and continue your path to financial success. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered individualized financial advice. If a specific investment is mentioned, it should not be considered a recommendation or endorsement to buy or sell the investment. All investments involve risk. Past performance does not guarantee future results. You are encouraged to seek the advice of a financial professional before implementing any investment strategies discussed. Yay, compliance!